Chapter 1. Before the Fall. 4 years before the blood-soaked sands of Vuren, there was laughter. The city of Kyel Aven, nestled on the sun-dappled plateaus of Lord's southern continent, echoed with it. Laughter from open-air markets, from the wind chimes of high balconies, from children chasing wing mice between polished stone walkways. The world had not yet burned. The sky was still clean. In a modest home carved into the cliffside, Kyel Aven sat on a polished floor, carefully tracing his fingers through a bowl of water. He was 7. His eyes, deep brown, nearly black in certain light, were locked in concentration. Beside him, his mother chuckled softly. "The goal isn't to make waves, love. It's to understand them." Kyle didn't answer. He leaned in closer, brow furrowed, watching how the slightest tremor of his fingertip sent ripples dancing outward. But he wasn't just watching. He was feeling them. The waves shimmered in his mind like whispers, patterns overlapping, some slow and wide, others tight and fast. But what caught him was what came before the ripple. A pressure, a sensation, like the moment before a blink or a word on the tip of the tongue. "I can feel when they're going to happen," he said. "Before I move." His mother paused, a data slate half read on her lap. "And when I close my eyes." Kyle dipped his head. "It's like they're still there, but they're not just water. They're other things too." She set the slate down gently. "You always were a quiet storm." His mother, Sarin Aven, was a language scholar who had taught kinetic sign at the University of Celadron. She could speak with a glance, argue with a shrug, and calm with a gesture. Kyle had memorized her hands before her words. She made the world legible when words failed. His father, Corvin, was a retired Defense Corps captain, stern but kind. He spent long afternoons teaching Kyle and his older brother Biren to spar, not with blasters, but with wooden poles and footwork. "A battle's won before it starts," he always said. "Know their rhythm, and you'll know the fight." Kyle had rhythm, more than anyone realized. He could feel things. Sense the moment someone entered a room. Know when a plate was about to fall. Feel his sister's anxiety before she spoke. It wasn't magic. It felt like being in tune with invisible music, as if the world were always playing something just beneath the surface. At night, he would lie in bed and let his senses drift. He'd picture the stars overhead not as lights, but as voices, each vibrating at a different pitch, part of a song he didn't understand but loved hearing. His sister Alara was 12, and already smarter than most adults Kyle knew. She kept him grounded, rolled her eyes when he got lost in thought, and made up stories for every passing freighter in the sky. Biren, at 10, was louder, bolder, more eager to impress their father. But even he knew something about Kyle was different. During hide and seek, Kyle always found them. During games, he moved just before someone called his name. He never boasted. He simply knew. "You're weird," Biran said one day, after losing a race to him 3 times in a row. Kyle shrugged. "So are the stars. Doesn't mean they're wrong." One morning, Kyle woke with his chest tight and his breath short. He ran to the window and looked out toward the city, to where the towers caught the rising sun. A shadow passed over them, not from the sky, from him. He didn't have words for it, not then. But later, he would recall the feeling as a ripple in the force, one that started not in the water, but in time. Something was coming. He just didn't know yet what, or what it would take from him. The attack came at night. Kyle had trouble sleeping. His breath felt too thick in his chest, and the familiar hum of the wind outside had changed. It no longer whispered through the shutters in the hallway. Instead, it pressed against the windows like a held breath. There was tension in the air, a subtle pressure behind his ears, as if the world itself were pausing to listen. Uneasy, he rose from bed, careful not to wake Biren, who snored with the confidence of a 10-year-old who believed nothing could touch them. Kyel padded barefoot down the hall, the soft tiles cool underfoot. The walls were painted in the calming hues his mother loved, dusty cream and violet, decorated with kinetic script quotes from old Lordian poets. Then the sirens began. The sound was low at first, a distant drone, like thunder caught in a bottle. Then came the first explosion, muffled, but close enough to rattle the windows. Light flashed outside, painting the hallway in shades of red. Another blast followed, this one shaking the floor so violently that a framed portrait fell from the wall and shattered. Kyel ran. His mother was already in the front room, emergency satchel in hand, face pale but composed. "Kyel, get your brother, now!" His father, Corvin, pulled on his old Defense Corps armor, half of it still dusty from years of disuse. He activated the small kinetic shield built into the doorframe, then turned to the console to check the district's status. "Cell Adron West is under assault," he growled. "Raider class, unknown insignia. They've breached the planetary grid. No Republic response yet." "Of course not," Saren spat. "They'll arrive when it's over, if at all." Alira came skidding into the room, barefoot and carrying a dim glow lamp in one hand and her toy vibroblade in the other. "I heard them," she panted. "We have to go underground." "We're trying," Saren said. "Kyel, Biran, into the hatch now." Corvin moved to the bookshelf in the hallway and slid it aside, revealing the emergency escape chute behind it. It descended into the cliffside caverns that had once served as wartime bunkers. Alira ushered her brothers toward it, while Saren pulled open the floor hatch to retrieve a secondary blaster. Then the lights went out. A brief flicker, then darkness. The kinetic shield flashed once, then failed entirely, and the front wall exploded. A shock wave of heat and sound surged into the house, tearing furniture into splinters. Glass from the wide front windows burst inward, spraying the room with deadly shards. Kyel was thrown into the corridor wall. His ears rang. Dust filled his lungs. Through the smoke and chaos, shadows emerged, figures in worn armor, bearing jagged weapons, their faces obscured by painted visors. Raiders, pirates, slavers. They carried stun pikes, scavenged blasters, and flamethrowers. One of them kicked over the dining table, laughing. Another fired into the ceiling. Corvin moved without hesitation. With a cry that shook the floor, he charged the nearest pirate, disarming him with a blow to the wrist and impaling him with the blade of a fallen wall sconce. The second shot him in the side with a disruptor pistol. The blast left a smoking hole where his ribs had been. He fell at Saren's feet. She screamed, raising her blaster. She fired 3 shots. One hit a raider in the throat, sending him crashing into the wall. But the last pirate shot her twice before she could fire again. She fell beside Corvin. Kyel couldn't move. The force surged through him, screaming in protest. His vision shimmered, blurred by hot tears and the vibrations of the dying house. His limbs wouldn't respond. His mind screamed for him to run, to fight, but his body locked in place. "Kyel!" Biren grabbed his arm, tugging desperately. "We have to go." Then Alira stepped in front of them. 12 years old, small, but unshaking. She held the glow lamp in one hand, the toy blade in the other. Its hum was pitiful, more vibration than weapon. The pirate laughed. "She gonna duel me with that?" Kyle's heart broke. "Don't," he tried to say. "Alira, don't." But she already had. She stood between her brother and death, just as their mother had once stood between them and a falling roof beam when Kyel was small. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood, and the pirate shot her in the chest. She collapsed, the glow lamp shattering beside her, casting wild flickers across the room. Then Kyel screamed. The world broke. The force surged from him like a thunderclap. Lights exploded, plaster cracked. Furniture hurled itself across the room. The pirates cursed and stumbled. In the chaos, Kyel felt Biren's hand slip from his. There was a second explosion, closer, brighter. Then silence. When Kyel awoke, he was buried in ash and rubble. The house was half collapsed. The floor above had crumbled, revealing open sky beyond scorched beams. He crawled out, gasping for breath, his ribs aching. He found his sister's glow lamp, shattered and dark. He found his mother's satchel, blood-stained but closed. He found nothing of Byran. No sign, no body, just absence. For 3 days, Kyel lived in the wreckage. He drank from a broken water pipe that had burst from the wall. He ate emergency rations scattered by the blast. He spoke to no one. He lit a fire and kept it low. He slept with one eye open, and when he dreamed of Alira. Not the way she had died, but the way she had stood. He remembered her strength, her courage, her stillness. And on the 4th day, when the militia arrived and the Republic finally noticed Celadron's pain, they found a boy sitting alone in the ruins of his childhood, looking at the horizon like someone who had already seen the end. He said nothing. He never cried. But something in him had changed, something that would never change back. The air still smelled like ash. When the Republic finally arrived, 4 days after the attack, their shuttles descended in a quiet procession, too clean, too orderly, and far too late. Silver and blue hulls gleamed in the morning light, cutting through the smoke that still lingered over the cliffs of Cel Adren like ghosts reluctant to leave. Kyel sat on a broken stone bench, hands folded in his lap, his face expressionless. Around him, emergency workers swept through the district like crows after a storm, cataloging bodies, interviewing survivors, scanning ruins for signs of structural collapse. Medical droids floated past, offering injections and rehydration tabs. No one noticed the boy who didn't speak. A field officer eventually approached, a tall woman in a dark gray uniform with a clipped Coruscanti accent. She crouched in front of Kyel and scanned him with a handheld biosensor. "Uninjured," she said, mostly to herself. "Vitals normal. Mild dehydration. You're lucky, kid." He didn't respond. She sighed. "What's your name?" Silence. "Family?" Kyel blinked once. That was all. The officer stood. "Tag him for orphan processing. He'll be transported to the emergency shelter in District 12. A protocol droid arrived shortly after, asking him questions in 3 languages. Kyel ignored all of them. Eventually, he was led away, not by force, but by the weight of inertia. He no longer had the strength to resist the current. He simply walked. District 12's emergency shelter was a warehouse retrofitted with bunk rows, plastoid dividers, and harsh white lighting that never turned off. Dozens of children sat in silence, some sobbing, some staring. A few played with broken toys or old data pads, pretending not to be afraid. Kyel didn't speak. He didn't eat much. He didn't sleep. When he closed his eyes, he saw Alira standing between him and a blaster bolt. He saw his father fall, his mother reach for him. Biren disappearing into smoke, over and over again. He waited for someone, anyone, to ask the right question. No one did. A Republic counselor visited once. She wore flowing robes and carried a warm smile. She spoke of new beginnings and the kindness of order. She asked Kyel to talk about his feelings. He said nothing. The woman left with a note in her file. Uncooperative, withdrawn. Mild trauma, typical. No Jedi came, not one. The slavers came 2 weeks later. They didn't arrive with violence. No alarms sounded, no windows shattered. They came with data pads, signatures, forged clearance codes, and bribes distributed with practiced precision. They smiled. They wore official crests and carried fabricated adoption documents. 3 guards turned away. One was paid to look into a maintenance fault. The counselor who had spoken to Kyel received a transfer order that same morning. The systems showed no breach. The logs were scrubbed. 6 children disappeared that night. Kyel was one of them. He was sedated with a hypo spray and pulled from his cot while unconscious. He awoke to chains biting into his wrists and ankles. His eyes stung. His throat was dry. The stale air of the ship reeked of iron and old sweat. Around him were other children, most younger than him, packed into containment crates, modified for organics. The slavers spoke in Houthis and Basic, negotiating over comms. "He's the quiet one," said one. "No outbursts, no resistance. Good prophet." Another replied, "Send him to Vurin. Fighting stock fetches double." Kyel didn't cry. He didn't plead. They expected fear, but what they found was silence. One slaver, a Wike with a long scar down his neck, tried to provoke him, leaning in close. "No tears, little ghost. Not even for Mama?" Kyel didn't blink. "Good," the Wike grunted. "You'll last longer than the others." The ship was cold. The lights flickered. Each jump through hyperspace came with a lurch and the groan of old stabilizers. The children were fed once a day. Water came in recycled ration tubes. Anyone who vomited was beaten. Those who cried too loudly were sedated. Kyel waited. Not for rescue, not for comfort. He waited to understand, to observe, to remember every name, every hallway, every bruise. Because the Force was with him, and he felt it now more clearly than ever, a hum beneath the silence, a pulse in the cold. The slavers were temporary, the pain was temporary, but he was not. The ship arrived on Vurin 6 days later. A planet of dust and heat, with skyless cities carved into canyons and red rock. Kyel was unloaded with the others, herded through a back entrance to avoid eyes. The slavers were greeted by guards with dark visors and shock staves. Papers were exchanged. So were credits. Kyel never saw the sky again, not until the pit.